Welcome to the third video on the sixth meditation. So we've just seen that the extended things, the corporeal world, physical things must exist. And now we should examine for a moment what we can trust of our sensory ideas of physical things, of corporeal objects, of bodies, of extended things. And, there's an important qualification that Descartes gives. And this qualification, he says, and this is reading the end of the paragraph that spans 115 to 116. He says, they, i.e., corporeal things, in a way that exactly corresponds through grasp cases, the grasp of the senses, but at least they possess all the properties which I clearly and distinctly understand, that is, all of those which So what's he saying here? What's he saying here? Well, he's saying, although he has demonstrated the existence of corporeal objects, he cannot know what he perceives is always true, right? So you can't perceive, you can't know that what he perceives is always true. We can know that these bodies will perform in accord with the laws of the mathematical sciences, right? So whenever we have a physical thing, that thing will have a shape, say, and we've got certain laws that we've devised in mathematics that will tell us how, when these things bump into one another, what happens, right? I don't know, maybe the square came and hit the circle, and then the circle, moved away, right? And we've got certain mathematical laws, and so we can know that these bodies will perform in accord with the laws of the mathematical sciences. But beyond this, they may not accord with the way the senses present them as being. For these ideas, the ideas we get through the senses are still confused and obscure, not clear and distinct. So nothing in the above argument, right, hinged on those sensory ideas being obscure or confused. All that Descartes was relying on was the passive character of sensory ideas. But when we have sensory ideas, generally speaking, they're not going to be completely clear and distinct, right? They're still obscure and confused. But what about these sensory qualities, things in space seem to have? I mean, for example, our square here appears to be blue, right? Is it really blue? I mean, or do things in space really make the sounds that we're inclined to take them to have? Well, as you'll remember, the meditator repeatedly insists that extended things may not be the way the senses present them, right? So remember the sun and the sensory idea of the sun, right? The senses present the sun as a small dot up in the sky that's very bright, but the meditator is always keeping in mind, well, the sun is not really that way. And so the senses are presenting the sun as one way, but the sun is not that way. And so extended things must have their mathematical properties in accord with their nature as extended things. But when it comes to their sensory qualities, the meditator refrains from making any concessions. Right? So the meditator says, well, we can't trust these sensory qualities that present, say, the sun as a small thing up in the sky, a small marble-sized sphere. Well, almost any concessions. I want to look at a passage from the Optics. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can switch over. Okay, in this passage here, looking at the Optics passage here. Descartes spells out that actually we can trust our senses just a little bit. They give us some information about the world that we can trust. So he says, hence you will have reason to conclude that there is no need to suppose that something material passes from objects to our eyes to make us see colors and light, or even that there is something in the objects which resembles the ideas or sensations that we have of them. In just the same way, when a blind man feels bodies, nothing has to issue from the bodies and pass along his stick to his hand, and the resistance or movement of the bodies, which is the sole cause of the sensations he has of them, is nothing like the ideas he forms of them. So what's he claiming here? Well, let me read it one more time, right? We're concluding that the information that comes from the senses might present objects in a way that does not, in fact, resemble the objects. Then he gives this analogy. He says, in just the same way, when a blind man feels bodies, nothing has to issue from the bodies and pass along his stick to the hand. And the resistance or movement of the bodies, which is the sole cause of the sensations he has of them, is nothing like the ideas he forms of them. So what's the claim here? You might want to pause the video. Take a second. Well, from these sensations, Descartes allows that if I perceive bodies that are different in some way, say I perceive red, and then I perceive green, well, there must be some difference in the causes that accounts for this difference in my seeing red and seeing green, this difference in my seeing, right? And what we've now shown, back on page 115 to 16, is that these causes, whatever it was that caused red in me and green in me, those are now in the bodies. We can see that those are now in the bodies. What the meditator does not allow is that those causes resemble our ideas of red and green. So all of those causes, pain, sound, different tactile qualities, rough, smooth, ensure that there's something different in the causes. Sorry, all of those ideas, pain, sound, different tactile qualities, smell, rude, etc., ensure us that there's something different in the causes, right? So there's something different between the thing that produces red in me and something that produces green in me. But we can't be ensured that the things are endowed with qualities that actually resemble our ideas of those qualities. And the reason seems to be that we do not clearly and distinctly perceive these ideas. We don't clearly and distinctly perceive red or green. So let's look at the wax example, right? Let's go back to the wax example. So what we truly understand about the piece of wax is not its sensory qualities, right? Those were very obscure and confused. And so the wax may not actually taste sweet or be white or smell of the honeycomb. Rather, what we can know is that the wax is extended. And this quality of extension is what we can study mathematically in physics and know clearly and distinctly. So at this point, we're certain that our mathematics and our physics has a secure foundation, but we can't be certain about what's going on with this or that particular extended thing, right? But we can be sure of what we know about how these things work in general through physics, and we can be sure that when different ideas are produced in our minds, like the ideas of red and the ideas of green, there's got to be some difference in the cause of those ideas that accounts for how there's a difference in the ideas themselves. Okay, in the next video, we'll turn to why it is that we can't trust our senses, and yet we can still be perfect in our kind.